I actually find it quite interesting that the community is shocked that Unchained was some of the highest representation out of this weekend's YCS. Reminder before we get into today's video, we have our Labor Day sale actually ending today. If you use code MEMORIAL5, you will save $5 on any of the sleeves and any of the field centers that we have up on the website right now. I'll leave a link down below so you can grab yours today. Make sure you smash the love and crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more Oz content. So we have the top 8 breakdown here for YCS, Sao Paulo, or however you pronounce it. It's Brazil. All right, so 34% or 8 of these are Unchained. Now, keep in mind that this is a 3v3. Things are going to be skewed a little bit more because, I mean, if you feel that, you know, a certain deck is the best deck, you're going to try to top load that as the best here. And I think that's kind of interesting, but Unchained, we've talked about that this deck has been a force in the format to really be reckoned with. The deck was tearing a lot of things up in a lot of the early stages, and it's just interesting to me that the numbers did carry through to this YCS, at least at the early stages here. Now, we had 3 Kashtira and 3 Purely, or 13% each in terms of the top 8 representation here. I'm not all that surprised. To be honest with you, these two decks have been pretty much fighting with each other from what we've seen from the regional data so far. And I do consistently put Kashtira a little bit further ahead of the rest of the meta because it usually feels like it is, at least when you're looking at regional things here. And Purely is just insanely good. Now, what ends up happening after you look at the top end of the meta here, where do we go from there? Well, we had 2 branded Chimera decks, and we've recently seen that branded Chimera really was just starting to fall off. There's not really much else to really say about it. People figured out how this deck works. They figured out the play lines with it, and unfortunately, the deck has just kind of been kicked back to the Stone Age here. It's still topping, don't get me wrong, but it's nowhere near those first 2 weeks of crazy turnover success that we saw at the earlier stages. And then we have, of course, some of the standard favorites here. You had 2 Labyrinth, you had 2 Dragon Link. I like to see more Dragon Link, I'm not going to lie, in terms of, representation. It usually feels a little bit better, but okay. But to my surprise, Sprite isn't fully out of the room just yet. We had 2 Sprite variants, one of which was a Runic for hire, and I'm still on record for saying I think that deck is crazy. I mean, the draw power that it has feels nuts. It feels so unfair when you're looking at just the turnover conversion that the deck has going for itself. And then we had a Mana Diem and a Vanquish Soul. So is there anything here in the top 8 that really surprises me? I mean, Unchained representation feels crazily high versus a lot of the other things here. But when you have a deck like this that just kind of can play Ignorant Turbo versus a lot of the rest of the meta, I don't blame people for taking advantage of that. It makes sense for a meta call. Now, our top 4. Oh boy, we have been reduced to 6 Unchained at this point. And it has, hear me out here for a second, a 50% representation at that point in time. That is actually insane. That turnover rate is nuts. And I don't know why people, once again, you have people like, oh my gosh, how is Unchained doing so crazily well? Well, it's Unchained at the end of the day. Like, there's a reason why this deck is as good as it actually is. So once again, cool stuff. We also had 2 Purely decks, putting it to the second most represented in the block here. And then we're down to 1 Dragon Link at this point in time, which, man, Dragon Link did not have a very good time here. And then, we're down to 1 Kashtira as well. Poor Kashtira. And then you have 1 Vanquish Soul and 1 Labyrinth here remaining. So Unchained domination still continues. You still see a lot of the standard meta still doing its thing. RIP to Dragon Link at that point in time. Now, where do things kind of shift off from here? Well, your grand finals are Purely, Vanquish Soul, and Labyrinth. So Labyrinth and Vanquish Soul both made it in to the finals. Now, you're going to lose a lot of your Unchained representation here, because on the opposite side of the table here, you have Dragon Link, you have Purely, and you have Unchained, actually piloted by Pack here. Now, of course, Pack's team did win, which means Dragon Link, Purely, and Unchained are walking away the winners of this. But the fact that that entire spread of Unchained drops off, you have no cash tier in the finals. I mean, I do once again want to say here that, you know, things are a little bit more skewed here because this is a 3v3. But one of the biggest things that you should take away from this is Unchained is a gosh darn good deck. Purely is insane for, you know, all of the advantage this deck has been generating this format. All of these amazing, you know, advantage trains that we've seen going on with this. Dragon Link is by far not out of the meta. All right. There's always, Dragon Link has been that consistent monster that sits around at the dinner table here. And it amazes me that people just, they look at it and they're like, all right, so why is this still doing its thing? Well, it's because the deck is, it's consistent. It covers all of its bases, and that's what you want. And then Rogue, on the other hand, down here, I mean, Vanquishal is actually pretty cool to still see sitting here doing its thing as well. And I'm going to toss Labyrinth into the little bit more the roguish category in comparison to the rest of the meta table that you're seeing here, all right? So I'm very curious to see going forward here. Obviously, we're waiting on some sort of ban list here in the near future. Oh boy, can't wait for that. Outside of that, the event looks like it went pretty well. Of course, there are a few little audio issues at certain points in the stream. I heard a lot of complaining about that, but it overall looks like, for this being put together short last minute, I like the results. It's good. All right, and then we're going to pass it over to a couple deck lists that I found. The first list here is this is some cash tier shenanigans. Now, I'm going to be completely upfront and honest with you here. We've seen 9,000 cash tier variants at this point in time, and it typically seems to look the same, but I will say a couple interesting things here. We're only on 4 books in the main deck here versus the standard 3 or 6, 4 or 5 that you're kind of used to seeing here. A little bit less value on the Book of Eclipse. Gravity Controller are actually showing up down here in the extra deck. That's a little spicy tech choice, and we're still relying on those lances as defensive options here. And of course, I see that we're also playing some Odd Eyes extra tools down here in the extra deck as well. So also double Zeus. This deck is going to aim to clean up a lot of the things that the opponent might actually be setting up that might not be the super craziest, most optimal at the end of the day. So that's kind of cool to see. Then we had some Unchained here. And yes, we are playing Pot of Extravagance in the deck. Also, we're playing Kaijus here. I actually like this because this is a much different approach than anything that I've really seen up to this point here. I've seen people testing out the idea of Extrav. I like that. You just kind of got to maximize more of the Unchained cards, which means some of the more expensive pieces you're going to spend a little bit more money on. But that draw 2 means that this deck can capitalize a lot more on things and get some huge crazy advantage. Now, the Kaijus also mean that you can answer any troublesome card that the opponent might be setting up, which is actually kind of good at the end of the day. All right, versus, you know, a lot of the other builds I've seen have played some sort of Book of Moon, some sort of Book of Eclipse. You kind of adjust however you need to for that. I also see that we're playing the other Trap Track. Yeah, it's Trap Track down there as well. So blow up an Unchained card and get a nice little trap. And then we have some Sprite for Hire for you here. To be honest with you, this looks pretty standard. You are actually not playing evenly matched in the main deck. Most of these variants that I've seen have relied on evenly as a board breaker-esque card to ensure that they can go ahead and set up here. But this duelist opted to not need that. And I mean, it did carry them all the way in to the top cut of the event, so you can't be too disappointed at that at the end of the day. Outside of that, double book I think is fine. Everything else for this build feels pretty optimized, honestly. I don't see anything else. Yeah, there's nothing really too out of left field with this list. So as of right now, that is everything that I have and I have seen on the YCS this weekend. I assume more info will come out. If there's anything interesting, I'll cover it. But please, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. I'll see your beautiful faces back here later today, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.